Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roast number 15. John, great to see you again.
Happy Friday, Sam. Good to see you.
John, today we've accidentally matched shirts now for several weeks in a row. So today I thought I'll wear a pink collared shirt, and there's no chance John will clash, and I was right.
You
So
are right.
today in our Reddit roast, we have a few really interesting, quite random profiles today. We've got somebody who absolutely hates their job, which is always entertaining to read. We've got someone who fosters kittens, and we have a bunch of people whining about students showing up drunk to MBA classes and the question mark over whether the academic quality is starting to deteriorate. So, interesting discussion. John, looking forward to get into it. Should we do our first profile?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have a 32-year-old male solutions architect, former tech consultant, with a bit of mumbo jumbo here about a track record of delivering results amid rising responsibility. I wonder if AI is involved in writing this. Certainly reads a bit that way. Basically, okay, background is interesting, John. Had an abusive childhood in a single parent household, learned independence and grit as a young age, hustled and worked through college. Uh, Interesting kind of hustle backstory there with a few rude words in the mix. Quite a resilient story, I think. Based in Dallas, looking to stay in Texas and in tech. As a result, targeting University of Texas McCombs and Rice Jones. Reach schools, Kellogg and Booth. Obviously, those would require a move. Kellogg from a digital marketing perspective. Booth from a data analytics perspective kind of makes sense as well. Right, academic background. Undergraduate from a top 30 public university. Major GPA 3.75. GMAT 680. GRE 331. Extracurriculars, a bunch of stuff here. Alumni advisor from the MIS Student Association. I was president of as a student. Engagement has been a bit mixed, but sounds like kind of basic academic extracurriculars. Work history, 8 years out of undergrad. Bunch of promotions in 4 years. Started as analyst as a T3 firm. Early promotion to senior analyst. July on track for a promotion, recruited by a T3 competitor for a senior analyst role, promoted to senior consultant, and then interviewed for a solution architect role at a big tech, but not FANG. Okay, a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo here about what that work involved. What I like is there's quite a lot of numbers in there in terms of budgets and upselling, etc. Use that in your resume, and the schools will like it. Okay, let's get on to the YMBA stuff. So basically, and this is why we try and simplify mumbo jumbo, because there's a lot of digging to be done here. But effectively, the goal is my interest lies on the business side. So has been a technical contributor until now and wants to work on the business side. But there's a wrinkle. Due to budget constraints, I was made redundant. Interesting. Biggest concern is whether this will kill my application. Okay, before we get into that, John, how do you see this profile as a former admissions reader? I know it's quite long. There's a lot of stuff to dig
Mhm.
into. How do you see this profile?
There's quite a bit of mumbo jumbo in there, but overall, I do like the theme of resilience with OP. I'll go through the motions and talk through those different dimensions. Academically, I love the GPA. That 3.75 puts OP at the range for some top schools. I know that his list doesn't include some M7s, but a 375 is a good GPA through and through. That
Yep.
GMAT score should not see the light of day, especially with a 244. That GRE is great. I would only list and specify that GRE score unless explicitly asked, because there's
Okay.
a big difference. So academically, pretty strong. Professionally, we could talk a little bit about the layoff, but up until then, I see a pretty good progression of roles. I see some impact. It's always nice to see, upselling a client by over 4 to 5x. The stakeholder management should be given due credit, as would evidence of strategy. Sorry to hear, OP, that you were laid off. but schools have had fielded their fair share of candidates who are in similar positions. So, obviously important to explain what went down and what you're working on in the meantime to help keep you abreast of work or anything else. Demographically, not much to go on. Maybe on the older side, Sam would love to hear your thoughts on that one. I think it's worthy to explain why it took you a while to graduate. That optional essay will work hard to help you achieve that. Goals, not much to go off on here, but I am seeing some strong LDP energy, as we love to come up with. But again, we can talk a little bit about how OP can fashion those goals and narrative. Sam, over to you.
Right. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I agree with you on the resilience narrative. I do think that could come through, maybe combined with the layoff. There's a bit of a story there of like, getting laid off and how I've bounced back and what I've been doing in my spare time. I'm imagining an optional essay, something that's like, right now, I'm unemployed, uh, but here's what I've been doing in the meantime. And to be honest, I'm not worried about it. I'm resilient. I grew up in a single family household, a single parent household. I paid my way through undergrad, blah, 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 and kind of used that kind of resilience and layoff story, combine them into an interesting optional essay. There's potential there.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, to your point, schools get it's layoff, being laid off is not a deal breaker anymore, right? It's not even taboo, really, right? We've been
Mhm.
ever since COVID, so many talented people have been churned through the companies they've been working at, that it's not taboo. It's not going to be a negative. You've just got to explain what you've done in the time and how it's made you a better person. And I think OP ought to be okay from that perspective. I agree with you on the academic front. A 331 and a 3.75 is really, really nice. There is this question mark. It is a major GPA. I wonder if there is another GPA there that we ought to be aware of, but it sounds like that's probably going to be above average anyway. Now, I had one other idea on this kind of unemployment resilience theme that I wanted to run past you, John. It feels to me like this applicant ought to be uh, so we look at this wrinkle. So sales org was right sized, and I was
Mhm.
laid off. Now, what he does say, since then I've done contracting work for former clients.
Mhm.
OP, I would really encourage you to formalize this contracting work, and say, rather than saying I've been unemployed since I was laid off, you say I worked at this firm. Then I transitioned into a contracting role, which I've been doing for this amount of time. And it might be that the gap is either smaller or non existent, even. And you maybe don't even need to bring unemployment up. It's quite an aggressive approach. John, are you aligned?
Yep. I think this is. I mean, yes, I think there's an angle to be played here. I think maybe, OP talking about the ability to have closer relationships with these clients. But yes, I mean, look, OP is not doing nothing. OP has meaningful contracts in place, and this definitely can have the opportunity to, again, allay any doubt that OP is twiddling his thumbs and not doing anything, with his time away from work.
Right. So what does that look like, right? Adventurous Can 1130. Adventurous Can LLC is the kind of the employer or self-employed on the resume as the last job. Bullet point one, executed XYZ with former client from so and so. Maybe a deliverable, improved, revenue from XYZ, maybe go to market, whatever it was, and have those as bullet points in your contracting work as a job.
Mhm.
You're not unemployed anymore.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, good. I that's what I've seen so far. I think, John, I think the conclusion here is actually quite a strong profile for these schools. Are you aligned? I think he ought to be. I don't want to say a shoe in for McCombs and
Mhm.
Jones, but like definitely a strong profile for those schools.
I think so. I think his target schools are those schools simply because he wants to stay in Texas.
Mhm.
But I think the mistake would be not applying to other schools in the T10, possibly M7 range. I think he has the stats for it. I think his academics are strong, and I think getting into those schools, even if you don't choose to attend, can always give you a leg up when you are looking to negotiate off of wait lists or with scholarships. So OP applied at I aim higher.
Yeah, aim a bit higher. And I think what this is probably trending towards, or I hope what this is trending towards, is offers from UT and or Rice with some scholarship money. And then you
Hmm.
get to, stay where you want to be. You don't have to invest the full tuition fee. And I think that would be quite a nice outcome. I think that's what OP should really be shooting for.
Agreed.
All right, amazing. Right, let's move on to the next profile. So, profile 2. In our notes, Mal has called this, I hate my job. Okay, so let's find out why OP hates her job. Working 10 hours a day in a research role, including weekends, with an hour-and-a-half commute. Oh my God, that already sounds horrible. I'm burnt out, considering resigning to fully focus on GMAT and MBA applications. Okay, profile, Indian female, 26 years old. Bachelor's and master's in biotech, 8.6 out of 10 CGPA in both. 2 years of research experience across some decently reputed institutions, a couple of research papers in progress, volunteering during COVID and had a personal gap. So I guess like a sort of an unemployment gap there is what we're basically talking about. Planning for fall 26 MBA intake. Okay, a little bit more whining about the work. 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, an hour-and-a-half commute, toxic work culture. I fear I won't get a strong recommendation from my current employer. John, that might be a factor. GMAT prep is suffering because of work pressure. Obviously, I get that. Considering quitting work to focus on GMAT. Okay, 6 very clear questions. 1, should I target, what GMAT score should I target? 2, given my profile, is it realistically to get into a top MBA program? How much weight do LORs carry? 4, should I quit now and focus on GMAT? 5, what can I do to strengthen my profile in the meantime? What will AdComs be thinking of my personal gap? Post MBA goals, transition into a corporate role, leverages my analytical and research skills, strategy, product management, life sciences consulting. Okay, interesting. And a little bit of sort of background here, I guess, that's come from one of the comments. Okay, John, lots to get our teeth into here. How do you see this profile from a high level perspective?
I think overall, I'd like to see a little bit more, Sam. We'll start with the academics.
Okay.
Look, no indication of school or GMAT. There's not much to go off of here.
Mm-hmm.
And an 8.6 CGPA is okay. But obviously it'll come down to the prestige of the school at this point. Look, and then if
You'd think if it was IIT, it would be mentioned, or if it was a
yeah,
top
yeah,
brand school, it might have been
sure.
mentioned.
Yeah. Look, I mean that GMAT needs to be like a 695 plus for this demo, and we can talk a little bit about that later on. But moving on to professional research experience is a tough one to unpack, mainly
Right.
because adcoms typically see it as more individual contributor roles, less evidence of leadership or impact, unless that you've contributed breakthrough research or have had impact on large scale institutions. There's an uphill battle to climb when you're fending against people with top-notch leadership and strategy experience. So and with 2 years, I don't see that much. I think there could be more to that schools would look for. Demographically, Indian female on the younger side. Goals, life sciences probably more likely given OP's background. The corporate roles would probably be a hard sell. So I'm a little iffy on this profile, Sam. But we can dive into any one of those questions and ways that she can help cobble a narrative based on what she has currently.
Yeah, okay. John, the bit that kind of stands out to me is it sounds like OP has basically only ever studied or done
Hmm.
academic research, just a very, very
Yes,
academic profile, and now wants to
sure.
go and do an MBA to yet again not get into the job market. Like that's
Yeah,
how I'm reading it. It's a bit cynical, but like I think the AdCom are going to see this and be like, look, at some point you're going to have to go and do some work in the real world, I'm afraid. And I would prefer that work in the real world to be done before the MBA so
yeah.
that you can then contribute, you can bring some sort of real world commercial
Hmm.
experience to the table during your classes. Because right
Hmm.
now, apart from some really niche expertise
Yep.
in like what is it, in biotech of some sort?
Hmm.
Like what are you going to contribute to the class? Like it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like there's that much real world experience that's going to get thrown in. So that's the bit that really jumps out at me, and I'm really wary from that perspective. And like you say, 2 years, it seems to me like the optimal path is probably you've done 2 years of research experience, you're absolutely sick of it, go and
Hmm.
pivot. You could probably, I reckon there's probably a possibility to pivot into a commercial role already without an
Hmm.
MBA. Might be quite
Hmm.
low level, be an analyst role, whatever. But at least then you start getting the real world experience, the commercial experience, and then use an MBA to break into the leadership functions. I
Sure.
think that's probably a more attractive path.
I agree.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, have there been cases of people who get in with no having just studied? Yeah, I've seen people who have gotten in with, towards the tail end of their PhDs, or they're doing their MDs, or they're going straight from, into law school, and they want to tack on like a dual degree. But those are exceptional cases, and those are typically companion degrees when you already have a degree at that school you're applying to. So I agree with you, Sam. I think there needs to be a little bit of real work experience, because just being in school is not going to position OP for any reputable MBA program out there.
Right. So let's address these 6 questions one at a time then. So what should target GMAT score be? I think you addressed this. 695.
Yeah,
So we're coming
minimum.
at that from like the average for these schools in the old, am I talking like T10, M7 kind of level? The average
Hmm.
has historically been about 730 on the old test. That translates to a roughly 685 or thereabouts on the new test. And you're saying 695, just a little bit above the average, basically,
Hmm.
is where she needs to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. So next question then, given my profile, is it realistically possible to get into a top M7? I think it's going to be tough, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think, yeah, hedge your bets. Don't put all your eggs in that basket, OP. I think it's a possibility, but especially if we're going to talk about the LORs next, I think you should be hedging your bets. Apply to jobs as well. Yeah. John, how much weight do LORs carry?
Look, for the most part, having read so many LORs during my time as a reader, the vast majority of them are good to great. If you see an LOR that is middling, that's going to be a pink or red flag, especially when recommenders, have to grade you on the grid scores, where they, uh, assess you on anything from your analytical ability, your ability to work well with others, to that final question where it asks, how enthusiastic how enthusiastic are you in your recommendation of the applicant. And if those scores aren't great, and if the written recommendation is commensurate with that rating, then that could tank your application.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I mean, are they both going to be weak? That's the question. Like maybe there's a
Hmm.
way of having it would be good to have one from the current work, but
Yeah.
only has really one work. Would you venture into the academic space and get a recommendation from a professor in this case?
I would say only do so if you've done substantial work with the professor, because
Huh.
the aperture for comparison would be, student against their peers. And it's very hard for them to speak to things that are business school friendly, right? The only situation, of course, is if you are a deferred MBA applicant. Of course, one of those recommendations tend to be at least from a professor.
Uh-huh.
For those who are who have graduated and are applying to MBA the normal route, you can use a professor recommendation, provided you've done real work for them. And obviously, there's a scale to that. So I think
Mm.
if there has been a prior relationship, then possibly. But it depends.
Okay. I'm going to jump. I've just done a quick search here, and you've referred to these you call them, yeah, ratings that recommenders are asked. I want to
Hmm.
show everybody watching what that looks like on the recommenders side. This is the Harvard form that goes to the recommenders. So they are asked to rank or rate you as an applicant in terms of analytical thinking, professional maturity, verbal communication, integrity, teamwork, listening skills, initiative. These are the criteria that Harvard are asking for. And your recommender is asked to rank you distinctive, strong, developing, area of concern, no potential for judgment. And I think what John's saying is that most LORs end up in these top two columns, right? Strong and distinctive. And that's sort of part of the course. And if the schools see mostly strong and distinctive in that, from the recommender in this space, fine. Recommendation. They'll look at the work, at the examples and the anecdotes in the written part, but you're broadly safe. If they see potential area of concern in a few places here because the recommender doesn't like you that much, this is the pink flag that John's referring to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Next question then was, would quitting now and possibly having a gap be seen negatively? John, let's get to the point here. What would you do if you were OP?
I would use the time. I would probably. It sounds like you're not getting having a great time at work. So obviously have a backup plan. I would maybe take on some meaningful work that translate what you do in the lab to the real world, and
an unpaid internship.
That could work. Yes, especially if you're able to demonstrate your ability to work with others, your ability to execute projects. I think that's going to be important to demonstrate, and that will give you time to work on the rest of your application. Hopefully, getting that 695 GMAT that which is the benchmark that Sam and I set together, among other things.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this depends on your ability to pay rent, and we get that. But in a sort of MBA ideal world, what I would suggest is, I think you sound like you're having a miserable time anyway. I would wrap that up. Maybe get those research papers out of the way, get these published, get your name on them, and then wrap when the time's right. And then if you did something like an unpaid internship for a biotech startup doing like their social media, for example, you can kind of frame that as a project. I took on these channels, started building out video content, whatever it may be, like showing some commercial nous. And then maybe you can like point to some revenue increases or some like tangible outcomes that have come from that from a commercial perspective. That kind of experience, I mean, I think you'll enjoy it, is one thing. And two, it will show the commercial aspect. It'll give you time to study for your GMAT, and it'll give you another recommender as well. You're worried about recommendations. If you did a unpaid internship for a decent amount of time and work closely with somebody, they could also give you a recommendation, and that might be valuable for you.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that kind of covers the what can I do to strengthen my profile. I think we focused on that. Commercial experience is really what you need. And will the adcoms be an understanding of the COVID and personal gap? John, we've said this many times before. Personal gap, employment gap, especially in and around COVID, is not a deal breaker. Just explain it in your optional essay, and you should be fine. Good. Okay, John, I think we've made our point very clearly there. Let's move on to the next profile, shall we?
Sure.
Cool. All right, let's do it. So, 24-year-old female marketing coordinator. Aiming intake year 2028. Okay, so a few years away, we're talking here. Would be applying in 2027. So we're talking about a year, applying in about a year. Okay, engineering marketing coordinator, GPA 3.3, 2 years of work experience in the Midwest, white female American, bachelor's in business management, international business and Spanish. Okay, probably 2 or 3 years away from starting business school. Looking for ways to strengthen my profile and refine my goals. Have not yet taken GMAT or GRE. Work experience, interned for a mining tech products company doing business development. Did big law as a coordinator. Then moved states and started as a marketing coordinator in an engineering firm working on CRM systems. Have been a year so far. So very varied background there. Okay, extracurriculars. In college, was in a sorority as well as a professional business fraternity. Did a study abroad in Barcelona. After working, also working towards a creative writing certificate for fun. Okay, so again, very varied extracurricular. So just a very varied background. Why MBA? Interested in eventually getting on a better trajectory to solidify my career path. very vague. I also enjoy school and networking, very, very vague. Post MBA goals, leadership development programs, operations management, open to other ideas, so pretty open ended. Schools, not really sure. Have heard good things about Minnesota Carlson, Indiana Kelly, UNC King Flagler, Kellogg, Fuqua. Okay, John, do your thing. Academics, what do you reckon?
Oof, well, the academics aren't great. They are not completely out of range for those schools that, she's applying to. But with a 3.3-ish plus, you would need a GMAT in the 655 plus range for Fuqua and UNC. I would say either way, Kellogg would be a big reach for OP. Professionally, look, I mean, coordinator role can have different flavors among AdCom. The way it's perceived, it's seen as support oriented. It's seen as not having much to do with analytics, strategy, and leadership. The types of things that admissions likes to see in all kinds
Yeah.
of professional experience. So foreseeably, look, in the next year or two, maybe that coordinator role would um, swell to something a little bit more consequential. Maybe it's a product, uh, maybe it's a marketing manager role, or something equivalent. But as it stands today, that's I would say on the weaker side for OP to present.
Mm.
Demographically, not much to opine on here. Goals, look, I think the LDP is okay. I mean, I would probably focus on, I think, the way that coordinators work is that they work with different functions, and gaining exposure to different functions is a good precursor to that, especially when you're able to work directly with cross-functional team members to implement new projects and so forth. Overall, I think some room for improvement, but again, OP is not applying this year. She's applying in a couple years down the line, so that will give her some things to think about to strengthen her profile. Over to you, Sam.
Hi. I think OP needs to find some focus.
Hmm.
That's my key takeaway here. I think OP is very disjointed so far.
Hmm.
Only 2 years of work experience, has already worked in big law, engineering, mining, tech, and is now looking at capital markets coordinator in real estate and a contract specialist in Salesforce. Just seems to have not found her groove yet. And
Yep.
for the MBA application in 2 years' time, that's going to be really, really important. When it comes down to it, when you're writing your essays and they're asking you what do you want to do and why, you're going to need to be able to show some common thread between all of these things you've done.
Hmm.
And if you can't do that, your profile is just going to be meh. It's not going to stand for anything. Now, there's a few things you can do. This next role choice is going to be really important, right? I would encourage OP to choose this role based on, assuming the MBA is the priority,
Hmm.
which of these roles plays most neatly into a narrative.
Hmm.
And also to, speak from the heart a little bit more, which of these roles genuinely interests you,
Hmm.
right? If you've identified that this real estate angle is something that's really genuinely interesting, based on maybe a construction narrative that's coming from the mining aspect. Maybe it's an engineering construction angle as well. Maybe that's the one you take because that helps you build this narrative.
Hmm.
I think that role is going to be really important. And I would also say that the extracurriculars are going to be important. Working in doing creative writing certificate for fun, that might be great, but that doesn't sound like that's going to add much weight to your application. If you
Hmm.
spend your extracurriculars focused on something that really aligns with this narrative, it's going to lead to a much more impactful application. For example, right now you're volunteering at a local animal shelter and a food bank. This sounds like you're in undergrad mode where you're just volunteering for
Hmm.
the sake of it and
Hmm.
like counting the
Hmm.
number of hours and then saying 80
Yep.
plus hours of whatever. Like business schools aren't thinking that way.
Sure.
Business schools want to see volunteering that aligns with a passion, that aligns with your goals, that aligns with your narrative. And I'm not seeing it right now. So if you're focused on construction, there are plenty of real estate groups that you can get involved in. There's plenty of Rebuild Together Philadelphia jumps to mind as like
Hmm.
a construction real estate focused extracurricular you could be involved in. But
Hmm.
just align all of these random things that you're doing into one narrative. It's going to be super important. Anything to add to that, John?
No, I like that flag, Sam. Look, I think there, you know, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think she needs to have focus. I think it's probably a plus that she's, obviously real estate, engineering. Some of these are a little bit more male dominated. So maybe mentioning that in some way in the application would be
Right.
worthy. But look, the extracurriculars are a little bit haphazard. I would say the volunteering is probably a thing to check off, but maybe the creative writing can be her desire to upskill herself and in storytelling, so she can find a better way to message offerings or reposition offerings within a very sort of technical function or technical firm. Maybe the Spanish angle, taking Spanish lessons, her study abroad in Barcelona, could be her way of potentially, developing closer relationships with, a specific market or a team or
Mm.
coworkers. I think there are ways to use her extracurriculars to augment some things she's done at work, but there has to be a narrative to begin with, and I think it's really important that she finds what that is.
Yeah. So two things. One, you can massage what you've already done to
Mm-hmm.
sort of kind of fit this narrative, like John says, with the creative writing and the Spanish. But also, you've got time to, frankly, just focus what you're doing on things that you care about and can create a stronger narrative. Good. Okay. Um, I think we've covered what we need to cover here. I think the overall, I want to leave on a positive note. You've got a lot going for you. You've got a lot going for you, OP. But you're going to have to try and find that focus. And by the way, if that's something you need help with, that's something we can do as well. That's creating narratives out of mixed experience is something that we do all day long. It's our bread and butter. So consider getting in touch. Okay, good. John, next profile. Interesting one. Asian female, 2.82 GPA, 330 GRE, 6 years work experience. Aiming for fall 2026. Would appreciate feedback. Chinese female, 28, bachelor 2.82, major in finance. Master's program with a 4.11 out of 4.0 GPA from Columbia. GRE 330, very strong quant score in particular. Work experience 4 years brand marketing in tech, 1 year strategy operations in an ed tech startup, a million plus followers content creator in China, then moved to New York and is now doing a growth marketing role at a non-profit there. Goal, short-term product manager in tech, long-term tech entrepreneur. Round one, aiming for NYU Stern and Cornell. Round two, CBS and Duke Fuqua. Any feedback, welcome. Okay, John, over to you. Academics. I know what you're going to say.
Ooh, that 2.82 is a little bit scary, Sam. I think she's going to need a very strong reason for it. I don't see it stated on her profile or her post. That 330 is strong, but I don't think it's quite enough to offset that 2.82, especially with some of the top schools that she has on that list. Have there been cases of people who have gotten in with, sub 3 GPAs? We did talk about that before, Sam, in our prior roast, especially looking at schools that publish the full range of folks who get in with, with those lower GPAs.
Yep.
But that's going to be a big red flag in her application. Professionally, look, growth marketing is cool, but I don't know what kind of growth marketing she has been working, what kind of growth marketing she's employed with, and then
Mhm.
the content creator angle is always welcome. Really cool to see that 1 mil followers, but how. What did she learn from it? How is she going to leverage that for her goals, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Demographically, obviously it makes a difference if you're Chinese American or Chinese. Either way, probably still slightly overrepresented in the pool here. Goals, look, tech PM is a little bit of a stretch unless you are forging the same uh, the the same sort of industry that you are familiar with. You know, if you're growth marketing in content creation or media and you want to be a tech PM there, that's an easier sell. And or you've done a little bit of, you know, work during your time as an influencer content creator in the space that, you know, shows your facility with manipulating these tools. But either way, I'm a little bit iffy on tech PM unless it's of a certain industry. I think we'll probably have a robust discussion about this, Sam, but over to you.
I hate the PM in tech goal. I hate it. Like I've got currently and previously like worked with clients who have had tech PM as their goal, and it has worked very well for them when they have proper tech experience. Developers transitioning to PM. I get it, right? You're working as an individual contributor, maybe a sort of a team lead, whatever, and you're used to building products and reporting into and helping and supporting product managers and saying, right, I want to transition to that. You've got the hard skills to be able to speak to developers. You can speak to them in their language. Right now, OP doesn't have that experience, as far as I can see. As far as I can see, doesn't have the hard skills to be a credible PM in tech, I think. And that's
Mhm.
going to be a biggie. And the schools are going to know that. And in a world where PMs are under pressure, in a sector that is under pressure, what chance has OP got of breaking into PM in tech? In my opinion, big fat zero. So I don't like that goal at all. Combine that with a 2.82 major GPA, and a GRE that is solid, but frankly not much above the average of the M7s. I don't like this profile at all, John.
That is fair. That's a fair assumption, and I'm aligned with that commentary as well.
Okay. And the other thing I want to say, I maybe you have a view on this, but these content creation kind of marketing roles, I see them as either an extracurricular, or if they are very, very aligned with a strong professional, you know, if they're part of your work, then you could be kind of building a narrative around a leadership in that space, leadership story in that space. But if you are I don't know, in this case, doing growth marketing at a non-profit, and the non-profit is, I don't know, something to do with art, and your content that you're making is like a cookery channel or something completely unrelated, then it really, you can't really give that leadership story in that space. And you can't really argue that it's adding that much to your profile. I don't know. I don't think it's going to add that much in and of itself unless you can massage that to link into your goals, perhaps. Now, John, the other thing I want to say is this school choice list, round one and round two split. I don't like that as a strategy. What do you think?
Look, I mean, typically, folks split out their you know, I mean, you would apply only in round two if you feel like you're not ready applying in round one. And most folks, if you already have the score in place, you should apply in round one. It's just a little bit less competitive generally versus round two. Um, Round two is typically reserved for a time when, you know, you don't get into schools that you know you want to attend in round one and you decide to apply again. I think if you have the time, absolutely, absolutely go for those schools. I don't think it's too much of a lift. We have 4 months to go, three months to go, give or take until our application deadline. So no reason why not.
I'm going to come at it from a different angle. One, I think those schools are very ambitious for a 2.82 GPA. That's the
Yep.
first. And I think that OP ought to be looking down the list a little bit. The point, I'm just going to show this again. The piece that John is referring to is this, which is Chicago Booth published their full range, and you can see that people have been admitted to Booth last year with a lower GPA than 2.8, but we know that it is not many. And so that is a real concern. My point is more around, oops, sorry. My point is more around this split. Apply to all of the schools you can in round one. Throw everything at round one. You shouldn't be deliberately carving out schools for round two. If if you apply to round one and everything goes belly up and you don't get any admits and whatever, then yeah, then plan B is round two. But you shouldn't be planning for it at this stage. Why? One, because you ought to be hopefully in a position to negotiate scholarships. But to negotiate scholarships, you need to have all of your offers come through at the same time. You need to be able to say to NYU Stern, hey, look, I really appreciate the offer, but I also have an offer from Duke. Is there anything you can do in terms of scholarships to make this decision easier for me? You can't do that if your offers are coming through in different rounds. You need those offers to come through at the same time. So I would generally encourage OP to throw all of these schools into round one. We're in May. It's got plenty of time to do it. Maybe consider lowering the threshold a little bit and maybe throwing in a few T20s in there as
Yeah,
well, given the GPA.
that is smart. I think that's a smart plan, Sam.
Right. Good. All right. The only other thing I wanted to quickly mention was there does seem to be a bit of an East Coast focus among these schools. I'm curious why, for example, Yale and maybe Tuck aren't in there if you're aiming for sort of T10, T15 bucket. Um, that jumps to mind. Yeah, just a thought. Anyway, we'll move on. Okay, so profile number 5, we have an interesting one here. I like this story. So the sub has been a great help in early stages of my MBA process. I would like to get a sense of where I stand as an applicant. Happy to help, OP. 30-year-old straight male Latino, undergrad GPA 3.95, John. We like that. Majored in marketing, minored in international business. Boards of 2 clubs, president for 1, won a couple of academic awards. Sounds like academics are pretty solid. 8 years of work experience with a few promotions as well. Extracurriculars, kitten fostering, team manager for an 8-person running relay team, fantasy football, baseball league commissioner. GMAT 635 on the first attempt, will be retaking. Nice. YMBA, looking to pivot out of entertainment into management consulting. Eesh. Eventually an in-house business strategy role. Think an MBA can help. Questions. Do you think coming from a non-traditional industry can hurt my profile? I'd like my GMAT to be as high as possible, but ideally, where should it be? Would be targeting T15. Is that feasible? Oof, lot to get into here. John, what do you think how do you think this profile stacks up?
I think there are some things about it that I like, Sam. Look, academically, really nice going with the GPA and that Summa honors. That GMAT though would be a little bit tricky. I think that will drag down OP. It needs to be in the 655, 665 range. And with the Q score in the low 80s, that needs to be in the mid 80s, which is the equivalent of about a 48 in the old quant GMAT structure. So look, I mean, one half of the of OP's academics are great. Just work on getting the other half up to par. Professionally, I don't know what role exactly this is in entertainment, but there have been a handful of studio junior executives or people working in service roles getting into top B schools. And I think that's a lucrative, well understood space for a career. Obviously, onus is on OP to really relay his impact, leadership and where possible, strategic work. But I do like the professional, provided that the entertainment role has legs to it. Demographically, slightly on the older side, but Latino is still considered a URM, so that's something to be said. Oh man, that management consulting goals, I think that's going to be a little bit tricky for OP. I think if I were OP, I would construct a narrative around. We can talk about this in a little bit, Sam, but about what he's observed in the entertainment industry, and then find a way to maintain ties to the industry as a post MBA role, but pivot function, whether it's a strategy leader, whether it's or something else, program management, but not management consulting. I think that's going to be a mistake.
I totally agree. I like everything else about this profile except for that goal. Luckily, the goal can change. What would make more sense? There's two goals that stand out to me that would be a lot more sensible given the entertainment background. One is his long-term goal, which is like in-house business strategy, some sort of strategy role in entertainment would be, a logical transition to make with an MBA. And the other has slipped my mind. It might come back to me later, but I think this is the main one, to be honest, is a role that is parallel or somewhat related to your current experience and but that uses the commercial analytical skills that you're going to get from the MBA. Management consulting is a bad idea for multiple reasons. One, there's lots of people who have already had experience in management consulting who are going to go back into it. Therefore, you need to be better than them at management consulting. I think that's really unlikely. Two, I think that management consulting firms, one thing they have an eye on is your GMAT, and it looks like your GMAT, it might change, but at the moment, it's possibly not going to be the strongest part of your profile. Two, it looks like, well, we know management consulting firms, particularly the main sort of post MBA ones, tend to be generalists, and you have a one industry experience. I don't see that as a good fit. And so, for lots of reasons, I just think forget about management consulting as a goal, focus on your current sector. And if you do that, answering this question, John, I don't think the non traditional industry is going to be a negative, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not going to be. So we've had plenty of clients in the past come from these kinds of roles. And by the way, the second option has come to me, and that's something like a leadership development program in the entertainment space, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would also be a valid goal. There's a couple, I believe Viacom have one, or certainly used to have one. That is a good alternative to a strategy role in your industry. Okay, GMAT. Let's talk about GMAT. It's 685 at the moment. You said earlier, John, that you'd like this to be 665 or so. Is that right?
I'm seeing a 635.
What would you like it to be?
I would say a 665, 655 plus. That would
Okay.
probably put it in sort of like the low 700 range, 700 plus. I think that's probably, look, I think overall OP's academic pillar is strong with a 3.95. I would hate for schools to mark him down for the academics pillar because of the GMAT,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
that'd be a real shame.
In many cases, you'll encounter candidates where the tides are against them with the GPA, and they need to have a high test score to reduce concern. But that GPA is great. Give yourself credit for it. Work hard on the GMAT, and I think that will help you ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm aligned. I think you can get away with a GMAT a little bit below the average of the schools. As you
Yeah.
said, on URM, strong GPA, strong professional background. But yeah, 665, 655, possibly if there's a good quant aspect. Fine. Okay. Would targeting T15s be feasible? Right. I guess this is the conclusion here. Given my wife's career, we'd also like to be near a major city. Okay. John, do you think T15s are feasible? If the GMAT came in where we've said.
I think very feasible.
All right. I'm aligned. I'm aligned. I think if you're going to play into the entertainment narrative, which is what we're kind of encouraging here, it sounds like West Coast is really where OP should be focused. The one that jumps to mind for on the entertainment side, UCLA have got a very strong history there, great network there. It's arguably a bit lower than OP is aiming for, but it would be a good idea. Do you think Haas is an option?
I think House is absolutely an option. I think, just hearing his profile, I've met, a couple of classmates with similar paths as OP had. So look, if that GMAT is in place, if the narrative is strong, if there's a credible way to link, parts of what Haas is able to offer, especially because a lot of tech entertainment companies now are trying to beef up their tech marketing or their tech offerings, and so finding a way to leverage both the host network as well as the geographic location would help build a pretty solid application for the school.
I love that. So, OP, if you're watching, John is a graduate and former admissions reader at Berkeley Haas. I think would be a perfect fit for you for as a consultant to help you get to where you can be. You might also want to get in touch for a GMAT tutor if you're struggling with that, given how important that GMAT is going to be for your app. Okay, good. John, final point to talk about now. Came across this really interesting thread in our MBA. Unpopular opinion, top MBA programs should eliminate grade non-disclosure and high curves. The academics are a joke, and that's a bad thing. So there is a long, long post. I'm not going to read it all, but basically the essence of it is that people say an MBA is about the network, the leadership development, career pivoting, and that the academic side is not that important. But OP reckons that's been taken way too far. Grade non-disclosure combined with high curves, which is absolutely true, creates an environment where students aren't encouraged, aren't incentivized to engage academically. I've seen classmates skip finals for ski trips, ignore major assignments without consequences, and even come to class hungover or drunk. Most classes are treated like a filler between recruiting events and social plans. That's a bit extreme. The structure actively discourages putting effort into coursework. I've seen people focus on, group chats are filled with party planning and music festival logistics. I've seen major projects go ignored because everyone's focused on Coachella. That's a missed opportunity. And then OP talks a little bit about the value of the accounting, the data science, etc., that can be gained from the MBA experience, and goes on to kind of compare it to his undergrad experience and say that in law school and medical school, students are held to high academic standards and they don't seem to be in an MBA. And then crucially, employers apparently, or he thinks, have caught on to this. And some hiring managers are even complaining that MBAs lack the hard skills now, such as financial modeling, SQL, analysis, etc. There's obviously a STEM designation aspect to this. And OP suggested if business schools want to fix this, they should remove grade non-disclosure, massively lower the curve, and raise academic expectations. There's a lot to dig into here. John, just high level. I mean, are you in line?
Yes, I understand where OP is coming from. Look, I think there's a temptation to slack on academics. But at the same time, the goal of attending B school, and it varies for people, typically is you want to accelerate your career, pivot careers. And so recruiting is, takes precedence over academics, as does building a network. Now, there are covenants in place where, people totally slack off, even, great disclosure or not, even if you don't do well or if you completely slack off, you will be placed on some kind of probation. And I've had classmates who have gone through that probation before, and, all of them have successfully been able to emerge from it, but you can't totally slack off from it. And look, the reality is, doing well on tests is one thing, but, showing up well in front of your classmates is another, right? Too often a lot of classes are case-based, and so when you're the recipient of the dreaded cold call, or if you are being asked a question, you want to be prepared well enough to show classmates that you know what you're talking about, because either passing on the question or stumbling over your words can really create this negative impression, which can damage you early on, in your business school tenure, in your MBA tenure. So those are my opening thoughts on this. I've completely seen this happen before, but I mean, there are nuances, and in classic MBA fashion, I think all of this really depends.
Fair. I think OP's onto something. I think it's fair. There is a trend and a kind of bit of a stereotype emerging. That said, 2 points that jump to my mind. One is you during the MBA, you can be as academically focused or not as you choose to be within reason. Different people will have different priorities. Some people will go into it absolutely determined to crush the get into the top 10% of the program, come out with some sort of distinction or certificate to say that, and really build up the hard skills. And they will have that focus going into it, and that will something that they will benefit from. And maybe if that's what their industry needs, then that's what they will benefit from coming out of. So it's up to the individual which angle to take. I'd like to think that I took a kind of halfway route, or sort of an extreme in both ways, which was that I was social chair of our cohort. I did a lot of partying. I did a lot of socializing, networking. But I also focused very, very hard on exams, and for like a week or two period before exams, blocked everything out, spent a lot of hours in the gym, in the library, and ended up with a distinction on Dean's List, etc. And
Congratulations.
so you can do both, but like that, you just got to, it's about time management. Again, going into it with a bit of a view of what you're looking for, and then managing your time appropriately to do that. I would also say, this is a bit tongue in cheek, but there's something to it. There is value in being able to show up to a class or a professional environment hungover / drunk, or even something in between, and be able to positively contribute to that discussion. When I worked in banking, we would regularly go out on a Thursday night with clients, put in a hard stint of networking with some beer involved, and then 6:15 in the morning on desk at the morning meeting, expected to contribute something meaningful. That's work, right? In lots of industries, that's life. You need to be able to do that. And if an MBA is preparing you for that, so be it. And the other thing I would say is that this Coachella point, which has given us a bit of a negative, people spend more time planning Coachella than class. Look, fast forward 10 years, you're going to remember those people that you went to Coachella with and had a crazy time at Coachella with more than whatever that coursework that you skipped was about. Guarantee it. And if you need a favor from somebody, the person you're going to call is that person who you've got that story of waking up in some random tent on the other side of a desert at Coachella. That's the person you're going to be able to call, because you've been through that together. Don't underestimate the value of these experiences when it comes to building your network long term.
I like that. I love that, Sam. Again, there's just so much nuance beyond the academics. Would your classmates remember you if you stumbled over a question about debits versus credits? Probably not, but they will remember you if you've done a bang-up job planning logistics for accommodation to Coachella, or the ski trips, or making sure that everyone's happy, or cooking up a storm, or just, mediating cross-functional mediating your cross-functionals, and making sure your priorities are in order, and planning things well. Those are the ones that stick.
Yeah. On one final cheesy note, people remember how you make them feel. People remember how you make them feel. And an MBA is an opportunity to make a lot of people feel great. And they will remember that, and they will appreciate that. John, bit philosophical there to end with. We won't get into the habit of doing that. I'm out of my comfort zone. John, great to see you again. Anybody watching, if you are looking for an admissions consultant, we are currently taking on clients for round 1 applications of this year. We will be roasting another set of profiles next week. We look forward to that. John, great to see you again. And next week, let's match shirts again, shall we?
Let's do it. Thanks, Sam.
Take care.
Bye.